Aloha and welcome to the Mod 1 overview. So, we started doing this a little while ago before each mod to just kind of give you an idea of where we're headed over the next 2 weeks. The intention is not that you're able to do anything different at the end of this. The point is only that you know what all these little pieces that we're learning over the next 2 weeks, what this kind of all builds into. So I'm showing you the finished Legos, so as we're building the pieces, it makes a little bit more sense. So if at the end of this you go, well, I can't do any of that. Yeah, no shit. That's the point of the next 2 weeks, is that we're developing the skills to be able to do the thing that I'm about to show you. Any questions about that before we get started? Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. What else? All right, let's dive in. So if we look at the standards, I almost tripped on one of Ahmed's swords. So these are our standards: demonstrating basic programming proficiency in Ruby, iterating over collections using built-in methods, building classes and objects using Ruby, modeling domains using ERDs, querying databases using SQL, building Ruby applications that persist data, modeling relationships using Ruby, and modeling relationships using Active Record. So I'm gonna keep track of these and we'll tick these off as we get to them. So we have basic programming proficiency. We have iterating. We have classes and objects. We got ERDs and SQL. We've got persistence. Modeling in Ruby, and then modeling in AR. So let's say I need to keep track of, let's do dogs and owners. And the rules are, we have a collection of dogs, and we can have a collection of owners. A single dog can have more than one owner. A single owner can have more than one dog. We call that a many-to-many relationship. And the way that we model, hey, there's that word, that is by making a collection of dog owners. And we say that one dog has many dog owners and one owner has many dog owners, and that's how we represent that relationship. The thing that I just did is an ERD. So this is a core programming skill. It's why we do it so early on. The ability to take nouns and talk about how they relate to each other. Neat. And then if we're storing these in a database, accessing them that way, that kind of stuff, then we do that with a language called SQL. And if we use an application, we say that we're using persistence. All that stuff kind of goes together. All right, so let's kind of tie this into these first three things. If I want to use the Ruby, some of this stuff you already know, in an application that keeps track of this stuff, so I can list out my dogs or list out the people who own a particular dog. I'm going to start by making an environment.rb file I'm going to make a dog.rb file. I'm going to make an owner.rb file. I'm going to make a dog owner.rb file. So what I have right now is I have 3 empty files in a folder. Nothing up this sleeve, nothing up this sleeve. If I hop into that environment file that I made, I can require dog and owner and dog owner. I can also require pry and then run binding.pry at the bottom. By the way, quick tour, because this is going to come up many times. This is a text editor. It's called Vim. It works just like VS Code or Atom or whatever you're using. The tabs at the top, that's the file that I'm working on. Otherwise, it looks like 1970s war games kind of stuff. There's plenty of good reasons to use it. For you, I wouldn't worry about it. I keep using whatever you're using, but there's really nothing different between this and what you're using right now. It just looks kind of funny. All right, so I have basically combined all of these empty files together into one thing. Then over in this dog file, I'm going to make a dog class. Then over in this owner file, I'm going to make an owner class. And then over in this dog owner file, I'm going to make a dog owner class. So these 3 files, nothing in them other than those classes, and they're getting all mushed together into this environment file. Now, something magical happens. If I run Ruby environment, I can do something like Bixby equals dog.new, and I get a dog object. I took that little template and I made an instance of it. I can make another one. I can say Mesa equals dog.new, and I get a different dog. You can tell it's a different dog because it's got a different jimble jamble of numbers and letters after it. And that is like the very basics of classes and objects. All we've done so far is take this picture that we drew and we're starting to represent it in code. These boxes, I have a way to represent that with the code that I've made. I'm going to pause there, and again, you don't have to be able to do this right now. That's what we're working on. But conceptually, what questions do you have about what I've just done? Yeah?
What does ERD mean?
ERD stands for Entity Relationship Diagram. This is an entity, this is a relationship, and when you combine them together, you get an entity relationship diagram. Great question. What else? Yeah?
So creating that dog object, did that populate so did that put it in your environment at any RD that had the dogs in as well? Or?
Nope.
No.
In fact, check this out. So I can type Bixby and I get the thing that I made. If I kill this off and start the program again and do Bixby, womp womp, everything dies. That's specifically what our skill for persisting data is about. Is I want it so that like Bixby sticks around after I kill the program and start it again. Good observation. What else? Conceptual questions about how this sticks together. Chuck.
I didn't understand binding that right.
Excellent. This is a good thing to know right now. So binding.pry, who can explain that for me? Hit me.
Someone explained it in a video. It's like having a flashlight in a dark place. It's a way to look at a specific section of code, like what's happening before the pry, so that you're not like juggled with what else is going on in the program.
Absolutely. And let's take a look at how I did that. I included it. I didn't write pry. Pry is like something somebody else wrote. It's Magic Ruby stuff. But once it's installed, I can use it in my application with require pry. And whenever I type binding.pry, it stops running the code and lets me use it, type whatever I want. Check out what happens when I get rid of it, or just comment it out. If I run that same file, it runs, and then I can never do anything because it doesn't stop the execution of the program so that I can use these classes and variables and all that kind of stuff I made. It just runs and then stops. And then as soon as I run binding.pry, it does this, does this, does this. And when it hits that line, it stops and lets me do whatever I want. So this was a super useful tool in things like Hashketball when you're like, what is the value of that variable at this point in the code? Stops execution of it so you can take a look at it. And then I'll show you something else kind of cool. So I do something there and then put another binding pry. It's going to stop on the first one it hits.
You need to require.
No, it's in there. The WeWork corporate spyware has been slowing down my computer. It's been in the news lately, believe it or not. So, all right, so I got to here, and this arrow is showing me that I'm at this point in the code. I haven't done any of this yet, but I have done this. So I can look at the dog class and any of that kind of stuff. I can even make a new dog. Pretty cool. All right, cool. Now I want to keep going in the code. I'm confident that I've loaded these classes in, whatever else. So when I get out of this binding.pry with Control-D, it's going to run this and hit the next binding.pry. So you can see it puts that to the screen, and now the arrow is there. That thing alone is like going to be your saving grace the next 3 weeks. You're going to do a lot of binding.prys.
This is the way to put a
Yes.
point into our code.
Exactly.
What is the big
So what was that?
What is the big in What is
Sorry, one more time.
the big tree?
Bixby. Bixby is my dog. I'm just saving a new dog into a variable.
Okay.
Yes. Same thing with Mesa. It's not special programming stuff. It's just a thing that I named my dog once upon a time. Yes.
What was the command to skip between the bindings? Or
Uh,
to the next binding?
So when you do Control-D, it stops execution of whatever's happening and then keeps running it.
No.
Cool.
No.
So let's say like in Hashketball you have like a method that goes through multiple key value pairs,
Mhm.
and you put binding pry at the end.
Mhm.
How do you keep going through tiers? Do you just keep running learn and it takes you?
No, so you do that with Control-D. So if it's in a loop, it's going to hit the binding.pry. You can take a look at what's happening. If you Control-D again, it's going to keep running the program and hit that binding pry again and again and again.
But can you do that by just writing binding pry at the very end of it, or do you have to add in multiple?
Nope, just once. If it's in the block that's being iterated over, it'll hit it every time. Good question. Yeah.
Can you go to the, it's like a ERD, the squares?
Mm-hmm.
Explain that again.
So for right now, what would be useful to know, these are nouns. Whatever the nouns are in your application. This one's a little bit hinky because we need to represent that a dog can have many owners and an owner can have many dogs. And this is the magic trick that makes that possible. But by and large, in an application, you got users. Users probably get a box. All right, does a user have posts? Cool. Do they have only one post ever, or can they have more than one post? Cool. Does that post, can it have more than one author? And so as we're trying to figure out what these rules are for our application, drawing these boxes and these lines are how we represent that. And we'll talk in a lot more detail about how we do that. Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry if everyone else you guys understand. Can you explain binding that pry one more time? Like, what?
Love to.
When do you use it, and what? Like, what's the purpose?
Um,
I'm having trouble like conceptualizing it.
Cool. And like, I'm so glad that you did this because you're probably not the only person who's not 100% there on this. And this is one that like, I'd like you to be able to do now. So I'm going to throw the question back to the crowd. Who can give who hasn't spoken yet, who can give a shot at explaining binding without pry? When we use it, why? Yeah, Alexis.
So if you're trying to see like a certain like variable, what it could return like inside of a method or something, like for example, then you can put the binding prime within the method, and then it'll stop like right in that method, and then like, you would return a variable, and it'll tell you what it's returning. Is it like a hash? Is it an array or something?
Sure.
And this is exactly what your input or like what you're outputting.
Okay.
Cool. So Ben, summarize what Alexis just said.
So, like, if you need to like know of like what something is inside of a method, you can put binding.pry and then put what you want to know and then require pry, and then it'll spit out what that is inside of the method.
Mm-hmm. And this is a lot more flexible than something like puts, which a lot of you might have been using also to like figure out what's happening somewhere, because it's interactive. I can not only stop the execution and see what's happening, but I can add new things. I can just play around with the code a little bit real time without having to rewrite the code and then rerun it, which is pretty cool.
So by doing creating your dog
Mhm.
there,
Yes.
does it only create there in the terminal?
Yes.
Or it creates also in your code?
It only creates it in the terminal.
Why would you do that?
That is a super good question. So, one, we also want this eventually to save so that even though it's still in the terminal, every time I run it, I'm keeping track of it. But these are going to be our most basic kinds of applications. Everything that we do on the web, including like this site, all it is under the hood is stuff like this. And so I can represent the data that I'm keeping track of visually like this, or I can do it with text like that. But it's fundamentally kind of the same thing underneath. And so that's where we're starting.
But why would you not just create the dog inside of your code? Why do you do all this?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So if I do it here, and I can say Bixby equals dog.new, and if I run this code any day now, One second is a lot longer than it seems. There we go. So I've successfully made a new dog and saved it in the code. I see it. It's right there. Why wouldn't I want to do that every time?
Not everybody using your program needs a copy of Bixby.
That's for one. Also, like, then I can't, I don't want to have to modify the code every time I want to interact with it. I want the behavior of my code and the data to live in two different places so that you and your mom and your best friend and your sister can all run this code with their data. And they can still use my code that's going to keep track of which dogs have which owners and which owners have which dogs, but they don't need, to Carl's point, my dog. That's my favorite, that's every teacher's favorite sound in the entire world. Cool, let's move on. So I've made these boxes, but I really haven't made these relationships. So before we do that though, I'm gonna do one more thing with my classes. Cool, I've made a dog. I don't have any data about the dog though. So I'm gonna make a method in this called initialize that takes in a name, and I'm going to save that name inside of the new dog that I made. I'm going to make it so that I can read that dog's name also. To wit, check this out. If I go over to the environment and say Bixby.new Bixby, when I read that Bixby variable, I should not only get like the dog that I made, but I should get its name also. Let's see if that worked. Let's go Ruby environment. I'm getting the impression this is getting slower every single time I do it. That's going to be a problem. Cool. So when I look at Bixby now, sweet. Bixby has a name. And even better, if I do Bixby.name, I get the string back for Bixby. Whoa! Now that I have a string, I can do all the shit that you guys have been doing with strings. I can do something like Bixby.name.length. All the stuff that we can do with strings, I can do with Bixby.name. I could do something like, I can give them an age also. When I do Bixby.age, now I have a number. All the programming stuff that I can do with numbers, I can do with Bixby.age now also. Whoa. And that's how a lot of the stuff you've been doing in your pre-work ends up tying into these applications that we're making. So let's do the same thing with owner. And we'll say that owner gets a name also. We want to be able to read it. Sickness. So now I can make dogs, I can make owners. So I'll say, oops. And the reason that I'm typing these in the environment is so I don't have to type them every time, but point stands that we still want, by and large, our data and our behavior to be separate. All right, so I've got owners, I've got dogs. Now let's say I want to be able to add a dog to an owner. So now I make a method called addDog that takes in a dog. And maybe I keep track of my dogs in an array. And so every time I call this, I do add dogs and I shovel in the dog. That's a gruesome phrasing, but so there we go. When I call add dog on a particular owner, I should be able to add something to their list of dogs. To wit, say I make another dog named Mesa, and I run this code. So I've got Kyle, I've got Mesa, I've got Bixby, and I can do Kyle.addDog Bixby, and I can do Kyle.addDog Mesa, and now I see, if I look at Kyle, I see an array of my dogs. Dope! And if that's an array, I can do all the shit that I can do with arrays. Like oops, actually, hang on. I've got to make those dogs readable. So if I give myself Bixby and Mesa, and those dogs are stored in an array, I can map, I can do all the stuff that we do with enumerables. So I'll add Mesa, I'll add Bixby, and now I've got Kyle.dogs. I can do something like Kyle.dogs.each. Do dog. and then puts dog.name, and it printed out Mesa and Bixby. Yeah,
Can I ask why you're assigning things with the at symbol, like at means equals to Mesa?
great question. So we have 3 different kinds of variables that we care about in Ruby, for right now at least. We have local variables. This is anytime we do something like this. We have instance variables. So when I'm making new instances of classes, this goes along with those. So when I make Bixby, this is Bixby's name. When I make Mesa, this is Mesa's name. And I'm taking this local variable here and taking the local variable and putting it on the instance. And then the other one, which we haven't done yet, is called a class variable. And this is something that's related to every single dog. Like, for example, all of the dogs. That's how we do that. Yeah, Chuck.
Oh, sorry.
She raised her hand.
Okay. Finn, hit me.
Why don't you have parentheses around the name?
That's a great question. So I can do this also. It works the exact same way. Ruby is crazy flexible on syntax, which unfortunately for you, I think is like maybe the worst attribute a language could have, like while you're learning it. But almost anything you do, there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 different ways you can write it that are equivalent. The design goal of Ruby was developer happiness, which is code for, hey, if you came from Perl, if you came from Python, if you came from Java, if you came from any of these other languages, you can write code however you're used to, and it'll work just fine. Which like is kind of a noble goal, but again, I think that makes it harder to learn. And so that is one of the barriers you're gonna have to get through. You will see that like with methods in particular, something like that's probably more common with Ruby folk. But it does this exact same thing. Also, when I did like the add owner or add dog, I did that. Could also put parentheses around that. But parentheses are largely optional in Ruby.
Would you get into the habit of trying to do that, or?
I would, if you're trying to develop a habit right now, I'd develop this one. It'll probably do the best for you. Same thing with this. But once we get into JavaScript is all parentheses all the time. So welcome to programming. We're assholes like that. Yeah, Alexis.
Can you just go back to the, like the add dog,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Where's the at?
So when I made a new dog, I did an instance variable called dogs that was an empty array. And whenever I call this method on it and give it a dog, I shovel that dog into that array.
Why do you put the name dot at? Oh, okay.
What was that?
No.
Okay, Finn.
Stop.
We'll come back to you. Finn?
How would you add the owner? Would you, if you, under add dog, if you wanted to be, you want the owner added to the dog file, right?
Cool.
Right now you're having a dog added.
Yeah. So let's do that over here. Let's say add owner. Do the exact same thing in reverse. So now I can add the dog or I can add the owner. And so when I run this code again, let's try doing it from the other side. So I've got Bixby, and I want to add Kyle as an owner. Cool, neat. That's all well and good. And now as Kyle, I want to add dog Mesa. Sweet. Now the problem is, when I look at Mesa's owners, I don't see me. Huh. And when I look at Kyle's dogs, I see Mesa, but I don't see Bixby. Uh-oh. That's because we're not using this class yet. This is keeping track of which people own which dogs. And so when I want to look up who my dogs are, and when I want to look up who the dog's owners are, there's this third thing that needs to keep track of all that for me. And if like your brain is on fire right now, like buckle up. It's going to keep being that way for 2 weeks. This is the hardest thing that we do in Mod 2. And this is like really kind of the watermark we're looking to get to by next Friday, is you comfortably being able to represent this relationship in Ruby. Because it is super abstract. But I'll show you what it looks like. Yes, indeed. Also, there are like 6 other videos of me doing this exact same talk. So if you didn't like how I said it this one time, I probably filled in some blank in a different version of it. On the website. I'll send out the link after this. Cool. So
Is that what the context for like month was on the one page?
yes,
That's like
exactly.
previous- Okay.
Yep. So awesome. So what I really need to do is make some use of this dog owner class. And so when I make a new instance of this, it's going to take in a dog and an owner, set its dog to the dog that we're passing in, the owner to the owner we're passing in, and it's going to keep track of every one of these that we make. And we want to be able to read dog and owner. Awesome. The way that this works is when an owner adds a new dog, it creates a new dog owner with itself and the dog that it's creating. And that gets added to this array. And then when dog is looking up its owners, it looks through all of the dogs and only brings back the ones where it's the dog. And then gets the owners from that. Like I said, this is the hardest thing we're going to do over the next 2 weeks. Let's see how it works. Yes, Chuck.
Your second line in all your class files is that attribute readers, those that's supposed to be. So are you not able to access that data unless you hit your variable in that?
Correct.
So it's a private variable.
Exactly. You got it. Good vocab.
That's why the chew is.
Yes. So if I don't do that and I do dog owner.dog, I'll go, I don't know what you're talking about.
Does it matter what order you can lump them in?
No, not at all. Finn.
Self and object with the value of dog, people and dog and owner. Like what is self?
Self is, when I'm initializing this class, self is the thing that I'm making. So it's probably easier with something like dog. When I'm making a new dog, self is referring to that dog that I'm making. If I did self.name or something like that, that would be Bixby. Don't worry too much about it. We're going to talk a lot more about self down the road. But my 5-second overview is that self refers to whatever instance of this class. We'll talk a lot more about it.
So if we have like a database of dogs and owners, and
Yes.
like a boarding place,
Mm-hmm.
with this dog owner, basically you'd be able to just search either direction.
Yes,
You'd be like,
exactly.
Right, I need Shorty, the dog.
Yes.
You'd be like, whoever is clever, but and then the other way around.
Yes, that's the entire point of this, is that you can look from either direction, and that data only exists in one place. So we don't have to maintain the dog's property of owner, and we don't have to maintain an owner property of dogs. It's in a separate thing that both of them look at. That's the brain bender.
Would you be able to just find by typing
Yes, in mod 2. And mod 2 is where we get like the graphic interfaces. All we're doing for the next 3 weeks is living in the command line. But you'll be shocked at what cool stuff you can do on just the command line.
Can you go back to the dog owner?
Yeah. Parker.
Does it make sense to think of self as being like those random numbers and letters that are typed out?
Yes. That's accurate.
So dog owner is the amalgamation of both owner and dog.
Yes.
But owner and dog still exist separately.
Correct. It is an incidence of them.
Okay.
Every unique combination of dog and owner that exists is represented by one of these. Carl.
That's like just a keyword that needs to be.
It's Ruby Magic.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what's the point of having a dog, like the two separate classes, dog and owner, as opposed to just having one with dog owner?
Great question. So I still want to be able to talk about a particular dog or a particular owner separate from the relationship that they have. I want to be able to see Bixby's name, not necessarily also like a particular person who owns Bixby. Yeah.
So in the all array is like the dog and the owner for each instance?
Yes, exactly. All right, so let's play with this a little bit. Some things might clear up a little bit. So I'm going to rewrite this add dog thing for owner. We're not going to keep track of our own dogs anymore. What we're going to do instead is we're going to make a dog owner.new. We'll pass in the dog and we'll pass in ourselves. And that does kind of the same thing. But part of the trick now is I need to be able to get all of my dogs. That's a little bit harder. So I'm going to make a dogs method, and what I need to do is say every dog owner, I'm going to start there. I want to select oops, hang on. Screwing up my Ruby syntax. I want, oops, stop it. We'll save that in like my dog owners. I only want ones where dog owner dot owner equals me. And then I'm going to take my dog owners and I'm going to map over that. And only return the dog. And then I'll return dogs. Let's see if it works. So if I do Kyle.addDog Bixby, womp womp. All right, I knew something was going to break. All right, so let's debug. Who can tell me what broke in this? Straightforward question. You don't need to know anything about the code. It tells you everything you need right here.
I don't think you have an array of push it.
Probably not. What is it specifically telling me is broken in my code?
Your shovel method is undefined.
Yep. And where is it trying to shovel, apparently? Line 8 in dog owner. So this is like maybe thing one you need to learn in this program. The error messages, they're not for IT, they're not for tech support. You're IT now, you're tech support now. That's the only way the computer can talk back to you. So when something breaks, don't go, oh no, I broke it. It's trying to tell you something. And it's telling me that I screwed up line 8, or at least it broke on line 8 in the dog owner file. So when I look on line 8, it's saying that that's undefined. And that would be because there is no at all. It's at all. Nice. What's up, Damon?
Why double at?
Because remember our 3 different kinds of variables: local, instance, class. Instance is 1 at, class is 2 ats. All right, let's try that again. Neat. So I made a new instance of dog owner. That's good. And now I want to do Kyle.dogs. Womp womp. I know why that happened. I also need to be able to make this read all. One more time for the money. All right, I add a dog. Hey, Kyle, who are your dogs? Oh, why, that'd be Bixby. That's all. And you can see that's an array. If I also do Kyle.addDog Mesa. Cool. Hey, Kyle, who are your dogs? Oh, just Bixby and Mesa, yo. And I can do that exact same thing in reverse. And I can get the, now I can see them from both sides. So if I take all this like wonky shit that I did to get, to add dog and list dogs, I'm just gonna copy that over here, get rid of the stuff that I had before. If I wanna add owner, the other way, self owner. And when I want to get all of my owners, see, my dog owners are going to be dog owner.dog equals self. And then I want owner from each of those. Exact same code, just flipped around. Now, when I add Mesa, I could also do something like Bixby.addOwner Kyle. And if I do Kyle.dogs, holy shit, there's both of them. If I do Bixby.owners, hey, there I am. That's the hardest thing you're going to do in the next 2 weeks. But by next Friday, I hope that you'll be able to code that from scratch and be able to explain how it works. If you can't do that right now, that's okay. But let's talk about some stuff that we just did. We did some like kind of basic Ruby stuff. We used things like select to iterate through objects. We did classes and objects. We modeled a relationship using Ruby. We didn't do anything with SQL. We didn't do anything with persistence. We didn't do anything with active record. I would like radically prioritize these other 5 over those 3. And if you can do that by next Friday, you like are ready to go on mod 1. Questions? Yeah, Parker.
How did we iterate?
Great question. And this is a lot of what you're going to be practicing today. We used select. And for bonus points, so and then I also did a map down here. Check this shit out. Ruby people don't like this. I don't care. If I do That does the exact same thing. Whoa. Ruby people love having like little intermediary variables all over the place. I like stuff like that. It's the JavaScript in me. Cool. Other questions? Mm-hmm.
Just kind of looking at that. So it's immediately, like, whatever coming off that first pass.
Exactly.
Immediately getting hit up by the dot map.
Correct.
What? Okay.
And the reason to do that is there's two hard things in programming: naming things and caching validation. So anytime you can not have to come up with a name for something, you've taken half of the hardest things in programming right off the table. But most Ruby people like having like a lot of intermediary variables that give you little stop signs.
I think
Chuck.
I missed something.
All right?
In dot map,
Yeah.
what is, I don't understand that.
Great question.
Like if we were to binding not pry this, what's going on?
Ooh, awesome. Let's.
I guess.
See, that was from the dog side, right? As an add owner, I think. So if I do add owner Kyle, awesome. Oh, did it? I don't think it stopped. Maybe it was add dog. Kyle dot add dog Bixby. No. Oh, it was in listing the dogs. Kyle dot dogs, or listing the owners. Bixby dot owners. There we go. All right, so we're into binding dot pry right now. What am I going to see when I see my dog owner? We're going to see the instance of Kyle owning Bixby or whoever. Oops. My dog owner. It's the instance of both of us. But the point of this method is I'm just trying to get the owners. I'm just trying to get Kyle out of this. I know it's Bixby. I'm Bixby. If I only want Kyle, I can go through each of these and just yank out the owner, which is exactly what I'm doing. And so I take an array of dog owner instances and turn that into an array of just owner instances. Because when I do my dog owner dot owner, I see me, and that's the thing that I actually want. You'll get tons of practice with map today. What else? Yeah, Parker.
Select, the function of the select enumerable it's just picking when the dog owner himself,
Correct.
or the dog owner himself.
There are 4 of these enumerables that you need to be pretty solid on. Map, select, reduce, and find. They all look really similar, and that like they take a block and then something returns out of that block and magic happens. Map transforms. I have 4 of something. I want to turn them into 4 of some transformed version of those. So I put in potatoes and raw beef, and I map them with like a fry method that turns those into French fries and hamburgers. That's a mapping. Select is same or fewer. I want to find out which of those are vegetarian. And so I check the is vegetarian property on each one of them and only return back the ones that match. Reduce, this one's the trickier one. And so if you're a little bit shaky on this one by next Friday, that's not the end of the world. But reduce is taking everything in an array or a hash and combining it into something. And find is first match. Whatever returns, the first thing to return truthy out of some block, that comes back from that. My favorite illustration of these like array prototype methods. It's explained with JavaScript, but it's the same shit. Is it? Oh, yeah, there it is. Good call. This is a different language, but it's the same idea. We map over these, and like we use a cook block, and we get these back. 4 and 4. We filter for vegetarian stuff. 4 down to 2. We reduce all of them with this combine function, and we get back poop. So, select is filter. Same thing. And like one of the reasons we're hammering on this so early on is like this is a universal concept. Almost every language has these concepts. And you should probably use these over things like for or while or any of those kinds of other looping mechanisms every chance you get. There are use cases for using those, and under the hood, a lot of these are just using for and while loops. But these describe your intention, what you're trying to do, so much better. And it's so much easier, it's so much harder to fuck up a map or a select or something than it is to accidentally get a variable wrong in a for loop. Like, I've been doing this a very long time, and I still screw that up. Alexis?
So select and filter are interchangeable?
Correct. Except Ruby doesn't call it filter, and so you can't do a dot filter or anything. But most languages you can. Ben?
Are we gonna get like a decent amount more practice with these?
Oh, yeah.
I still feel like I.
Oh, yeah, and you need it under your fingers. Ben?
The criteria for select, can you say if not this?
Mm-hmm.
Because after you have the pipe, I don't know what word you're using, you have the name of your variable in there.
Yeah, so the way that works is select is looking for, it will include anything that returns truthy in that block. So, if I do this, anything that returns truthy for that gets included. If I did stop it. If I did that, it would get every dog I don't own. Cool. Other questions about anything we've talked about? Yeah, Parker.
Does stuff like map and select, does it return automatically?
Exactly. And almost everything in Ruby does. It returns whatever the last line is. And the point of select and map is we take in an array or a hash, and then we do whatever that thing is doing, and we get back a new array with whatever thing was supposed to happen, either smaller or transformed or whatever.
What
Yeah.
on reduce, is that similar, something like hash recall, there's 2 arrays of hashes, and
Mhm.
you reduce those into, usually use to bring them all into
Yep.
one hash and then filter out of.
Absolutely. Also, anything like summing or totaling or something like that, reduce is usually a good match for that. And reduce is a Swiss Army knife. Every single one of these you can recreate with reduce also, which is part of what makes it a little bit harder to understand than the other 3. Because if we're combining everything into one thing, that thing we're combining into can also be an array or a hash or whatever else. And so that's where that gets a little bit weird. But yeah, anytime you're combining stuff reduces the thing. Time for one more. Yeah.
If you use a dot map function,
Uh-huh.
does that return an array, whereas like a dot each does not return an array?
Dot each in Ruby, I believe, returns the original thing you were working with unchanged. Map and select always return arrays, even if you started with a hash. And then reduce returns whatever the last thing in your like block is. It could be any data type. And then find returns whatever the data type of the thing you matched was. But these two always return arrays.
Can you modify find to return more than just the first one? Like,
No, if you wanted more than one thing, then you'd want to select.
okay.
Because like by definition, this is more than one thing, and this is one thing. So something I think that's really common is you might have an array of objects or an array of hashes, and you want to find the first match. And so you'd get back an object or a hash instead of having to get back an array with one thing in it and then just get the first one. But yeah, otherwise, these serve very similar functions, except this is always going to return an array, and this, generally speaking, isn't. Yeah.
Is there a find all? Is that, or am I thinking of something else?
There is a similar thing in active record, but whenever you want to find all, that's another kind of select.
Okay. Okay.
What would you use return if you just wanted to return like true or false?
Like, does this thing have this thing? So you can write a function or a method that'll do that. Like, I might say like def has owners, and I might return self.owners.length is greater than 0, and that'll return true or false. But double equals, exclamation point equals, greater than, less than, all those things return true or false. So you're looking for something like that. Jason? Oh. Yeah.
Could you have written the def owners, where you have the two like nested
Uh-huh.
enumerables? Could you have written those with like the braces instead of the do, or do you need the do because it's a multi-line?
You need you don't technically need the do in there. I could have done that, and I'm pretty sure it works the exact same way. Ruby folk use do and end if it's more than one line by convention, and they use the braces if it's one line by convention. And so, like, if I wanted to use those braces, I'd probably do something more like that. But that's not a rule. That's just a Rubyist thing. Cool. What else? Awesome. I'll get this video posted. You guys have to learn how to computer with Kathleen. So thank you very much. That's where we're going.